Please, sir, I want some more. Please, sir, I want some more.
Hi there, and welcome to Lost in Literature. I'll be doing Oliver Asks for More by Charles Dickens. It's really a very simple story taken from his novel um, called Oliver Twist. Uh, but what is amazing is the way this story reflects the kind of historical period in which it was based, and that is the Victorian age. It was an era of shocking contrasts. On one hand, you had the industrial revolution going on full pelt, and many scientists and others were coming up with all kinds of inventions, and factories were mushrooming everywhere, and people from the rural areas of England, they were flocking to the cities for jobs. And you had also this great divide between the rich people and the poor people, the aristocratic lot and the working population. So these were all the contrasts, and somehow children had the worst of it. And that is what this story is all about. So let's look at it in detail. Um, well, Oliver Asks for More by Charles Dickens. Among other buildings in a town in England, there was a house for poor people who had no money and nowhere to live. This was called the workhouse. Oliver Twist was born in a workhouse. His mother, a young woman, lay ill in bed. A doctor and an old woman stood by her side. She lifted her head from the pillow. "Let me see the child and die," she said. "Oh, you mustn't talk about dying yet," said the doctor. "No, dear," said the old woman. "You're too young to die." The young woman shook her head and held out her hand towards the child. The doctor put the child in her arms. She pressed her cold white lips to its face and then fell back. "She's dead," said the doctor. "Yes, poor dear," said the old woman, as she took the child away from its dead mother. "Poor dear." So let's look at this part of the story. All right, I have a number of points here, and I hope I remember enough to cover all of them. Okay, well, it's very evident that there was a yawning gap between the rich and the poor in Victorian England. Victorian England, in the sense it was ruled by Queen Victoria for a long period of time. All right, and um, in fact, the first sentence is what the novel Oliver Twist begins with. And uh, Dickens somehow gets our attention, focused on these workhouses, which were typical buildings, where poor people who had no house or job were brought. All right, and they would be made to work. I mean, it was not ordinary work, but very, very hard work. um, like, for instance, they had to pick oakum. Now this oakum was some kind of a fiber, all right, which was used in ships, and it was full of um, tar. And these people, and they were very tough fibers of jute, and it had to be beaten, and a nail was used to remove the tar. It was very, very hard, labor. And the children were also put in factories. Child labor was rampant. They were put in factories because the children could go into the tiniest place, I mean, the most, you know, um, what do you call it? Most tight spots in factories. So this was one of the defects of the age. Now, we also learn the circumstances under which Oliver was born. His mother had turned up at the workhouse and she had given birth to Oliver, and she had died soon after. And you see now, during the Victorian age, the women, I mean, families had many, many children. For instance, Queen Victoria herself had about 9 or 10 children. Same with Dickens. So you can imagine how large each family was. And invariably, many of them died for different reasons. Firstly, there were people who had moved from the rural areas to find jobs. And these people, kind of, there were so many that there was a population boom in towns, all right? And that created a problem, for housing. There wasn't adequate housing. And so slums grew up. And the sewage system was not very sophisticated, and there was hardly any potable water. And in fact, the whole place was kind of, I mean, most of the slums and the factory areas were very, very dirty. The houses were overcrowded. I'm sorry. The houses were overcrowded and built very, very close, and sometimes the wall between two houses was just a single one, and they were all crammed with people who just woke up in the morning and mechanically went to the factories to work. Children were also sent. Dickens himself had worked as a child. All right. So that's what we learn about the circumstances under which Oliver was born. All right. He was born in a workhouse because his mother had been forced to leave her town, and she had walked all the way to the workhouse, and she had died not only due to the stress of labor pains but also because she was completely fatigued walking all that way. And the other thing we should notice is the attitude of the doctor and, the attendant there, the female attendant. They were very, of course, they consoled her when she said that she'll probably die, that she was going to die. She just wanted to have a look at her son. They consoled her, but it was very mechanical. They had seen many such sights. And then, of course, she died, and the doctor announced her death, oh, she's dead. And then he went away for his dinner after checking out one or two things. So, you see, mortality rate was very high in Victorian England. Diseases spread like fire, particularly cholera and such things, because water was not um, good enough to drink or for anything. All right. We'll go on to the second part now, and we'll find out why the mother had to leave her town. Okay. She was a good looking girl, said the doctor, as he put on his hat and gloves. Where did she come from? She was brought here last night, said the old woman. She was lying in the street. She had walked a long way and her shoes had holes in them. Nobody knows where she came from or where she was going to. The doctor raised the dead woman's left hand. "The usual story," he said. "I see that she has no ring on her finger. She wasn't married. Good night." And he went home to his dinner. The old woman sat down on a chair in front of the fire and began to dress the baby again, very mechanical. She dressed him in the very old clothes used for babies who were born in workhouses, the hand-me-downs. The child was an orphan, born into a world which had no pity or love for him. Now, here we have we learn more, in fact, about why Oliver was born under such circumstances. Oliver's mother was unwed. She was not married. And this meant a lot of social ostracism in society. Okay? And so she had to leave the place. And she walked all the way to a faraway place and just about made it to the workhouse. And this old lady who was an attendant made the observation to the doctor that her shoes were full of holes because she had walked a long way. Now, the Victorian society uh, applied double standards, in matters of morality. They had strict laws, but they were quite lax with themselves in the sense, on one hand, a lot of importance was given to the family, all right? But it was a male dominated society, and the women were expected to look after the children and groom them and bring them, guide them into good human beings with family values. But at the same time, this Victorian society had no compassion for unwed mothers or for children, poor children. They didn't care a jot. All right. And later in the novel, we come to know that Oliver's mother had been, going around with quite a wealthy man, and she had run away. Somehow she hadn't gotten married to him, so she had to leave the place. And later on, the same man leaves. He bequeaths quite a bit of his property to Oliver, but that happens much later in the novel. And then we also have the attitude of the doctor, who's the first one to notice that this lady is not wearing a ring. And he coolly goes home. He couldn't care less. He must have been so busy all the time with so many women having children, because every family was large. Women were expected to have plenty of babies in those days. Like I told you, the queen herself had many. Imagine having 9 or 10 kids. And the old woman had obviously attended to many such births, as the doctor's assistant. So she just um, sat back, took the baby, to her lap and dressed him up, and that was it. There was no pity at all for the unfortunate. All right? So that was Oliver's life, the start of his life. We'll go now to the third part. No one was able to discover who the baby's father was or what his mother's name was. Mr. Bumble, an important officer in the town, invented a name for the baby. He chose the name Oliver Twist. "We name the new babies here in the order of from A to Z," he explained. "When people asked, I named the last one Swubble. This one is Twist. The next one will be Unwin." At the age of 9, Oliver was a pale, thin child. He and the other workhouse boys never had enough warm clothes or food. They were given only 3 meals of thin soup every day. On Sundays, They had a small piece of bread. They were fed in a big hall. A large pot stood at one end of the room, and the soup was served by the master. Each boy had one small bowl of soup and no more. The bowls never needed washing because the boys cleaned them with their spoons until they shone. One day, Oliver and his friends decided that one boy would walk up to the master after supper and ask for more soup. Oliver was chosen. Poor boy. Oliver was chosen. So now we come to the part where we learn more about the workhouse ethics. How was it, uh, you know, um, handled? How was it administered? And who was the person in charge of it? Well, Mr. Bumble was in charge of it. Because in those days, people believed in good values, they believed in charity and all that. They donated a lot to the churches. So automatically the government assigned the workhouses to the church to look after. And invariably, one of the minor officers, perhaps a beadle like Mr. Bumble, would be in charge of workhouses. All right. Now, Mr. Beadle was a very greedy, pompous, horrible man. He was very, very mercenary. He misappropriated the funds given by the church and he starved the children. He would not even give them warm clothes. They were provided very, very scanty gruel or soup 3 times a day, and that's it. All right? And he's also got this very, practical, very, very kind of logical, mechanical kind of attitude, because that was what was admired in those days with all the industries and everything coming up. People liked that kind of mentality. So he's very proud when he tells people, how he names these orphans and how their names follow an alphabetical order. And what horrible names like Unwin and Twist and Swabble. Absolutely horrible names. All right. So that is how Oliver became Oliver Twist. This man had no feelings. He was absolutely cruel. And then, of course, the children, they were subjected to very long hours of manual labor in workhouses. In fact, most of the inmates were involved in hard labor, especially, picking oakum. That jute thingy I told you about is honestly terrible work. Okay? So they were all given work and then they were starved. Food was so little, and of course, if the inmates, including children, did not obey, they were subjected to harsh punishments. That was another thing. And the children uh, not only had to put up with bitter cold weather, on top of that they had to be hungry. That is when things came to a head. And it's very interesting how things came to a point when Oliver was chosen to go and ask the master who distributed food, who, ladled out the soup for more soup. Apparently, one of the boys said that he was so hungry that very soon he was going to eat up another boy. He was going to eat up a boy he could get hold of. And this frightened all the boys. They were all very young, just 9 and 10 and whatnots. They became so unnerved by that they got together and decided that somebody must go and ask for more ration. What they were getting was just not enough. And that is how poor Oliver was chosen to go and ask the master for more food. All right? Okay. We go to the next bit now. At the age of 9, Oliver was a pale, thin child. I don't know if I've done this bit already. Let me just check. Yeah, I think I have. I'm sorry. Okay, let me not bungle it up more. Okay, let's go to the next part. In the evening, the boys sat down at the tables. The master stood by the pot. You already know the scene. It was a huge hall. And the master stood by the pot and the soup was served. It disappeared quickly. The boys whispered and made signs to Oliver. He stood up from the table and went to the master with a bowl and spoon in his hand. "Please, sir," he said, "I want some more." The master was a fat, healthy man, but he went very pale. He looked with surprise at the small boy, this poor, undernourished boy. "What?" said the master, at last, in a quiet voice. "Please, sir," repeated Oliver, "I want some more." The master hit Oliver with his spoon, then seized him and cried for help. Mr. Bumble rushed into the room, and the master told him what Oliver had said. "He asked for more?" Mr. Bumble cried. "I cannot believe it. One day they'll hang the boy." Goodness, this is one of the most dramatic scenes in this book. All right, where Oliver asks for more food. And you can see here the visual difference between these starved children and the fat, healthy master who was doling out the soup into small bowls. All right. And of course, the master was absolutely shocked, surprised at Oliver's guts' temerity to ask for more soup. So he hit Oliver with a spoon, gave him one whack, and then he yelled. Soon Bumble made his appearance, and he was also shocked by Oliver's behavior. And then he predicts grandly that someday Oliver would be hanged. On what basis? Just for asking for more food when they were subjected to uh, terrible rations? All right, such insufficient quantities of food, and not even proper food, just soup, a thin kind of gruel. Now, this gentleman also, put up a notice the next day, Mr. Bumble, offering about £5 to anybody who will relieve him of Oliver. All right, he didn't want to keep Oliver in the workhouse. He feared that he might affect the other children, and soon all of them will be clamoring for more food. He didn't want to take a chance with Oliver. He would rather pay £5 and get rid of this boy. All right. He took Oliver away, that's Mr. Bumble, and shut him in a dark room. The next morning, a notice appeared on the workhouse gate. £5 were offered to anybody who would take Oliver Twist. Oliver was a prisoner in that dark, cold room for a whole week. Every morning he was taken outside to wash, and Mr. Bumble beat him with a stick. Then he was taken into the large hall where the boys had their soup. Mr. Bumble beat him in front of everybody. How humiliating. He cried all day. When night came, he tried to sleep, but he was cold, lonely, and frightened in that terrible dark room. But one day outside the high workhouse gate, nobody could escape, Mr. Bumble met Mr. Sowerberry. Mr. Sowerberry uh, was a tall, thin man who wore black clothes and made coffins. Many of his coffins were for the poor people who died in the workhouse. I have prepared the coffins for the two women who died last night, he said to Mr. Bumble. There you are. So many women died. And death was nothing. It was very natural for all of them. Good, said Mr. Bumble. You'll be rich one day, Mr. Sawbury. Do you know anybody who wants a boy? And £5? He raised his stick and pointed to the notice on the gate. And as luck would have it, Mr. Sawbury took Oliver. All right? And in this bit, you do have, you know, um, Oliver getting locked and punished, beaten up, and once again beaten in front of the boys in the hall. You can imagine the humiliation, the suffering, the torture that this poor child underwent. But finally, Oliver gets apprenticed to the undertaker, Mr. Sawbury. So let's hope his life got a little better. And I'll stop at this point and leave you. If you like this, do hit a like and subscribe to my channel. I could do with more likes and subscribers. Bye for now.